Because, we always harpen back to, stuff from 25, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Governor Atiyeh, our state is fundamentally different than it was 30, 40 years ago. Don't you agree? I mean, it's hard to, Republicans were in control then.
Yeah, we're a totally different country than we
Yeah.
were. Donald Trump is president. I mean, again, stuff that you wouldn't have
Yeah.
expected. I think in hindsight, it should have been more obvious that he was a contender just because his name ID was sort of universal and it
Mm.
wasn't necessarily clear exactly where he was politically. He's kind of been all over the map politically. And if you look at our
Yeah.
history, people like that do get elected. Well-known people that aren't necessarily tied in. Obviously he had to pick a political party to run, but
Yeah.
he's eschewed a lot of Republican orthodoxy. He hasn't been the same as Republicans have been on lots of issues. He's focused on different stuff, and some of it's been successful, some of it hasn't. But we're just totally different now.
I think, there was a guy I was watching Bill Maher this morning. I was up, early, of course, right? Election day. You can't sit there. You just sit there and think about woulda, coulda, shoulda. Um, can't do much about it now. But I think, and I was listening to Bill Maher, and they had this historian guy on there, and they were talking about like a fascism and communism, and like why the left is calling Donald Trump a fascist. And he had a really good point. He goes, because we don't know what to call him. So we harken back into history to come up with a term but if you really look at it, he's not a fascist by any means. Does he? Because like you said, he's all over the map. Like he's a populist on one level. He's a nationalist, but he's also a populist, but he's kind of now for a little bit of illegal immigration, apparently. So, but he wants the borders secure. Like he's kind of all over the map, and you can't really put him in one bucket or another. And I think that's the same thing with calling the leftists communist, right? Like we throw them in that bucket because there's clearly some communism traits, but not all, right? So, but we harken back to that. And I don't know what to call somebody who's a far left liberal, but they're kind of a populist too. They just don't like big corporations, but except for they like the big corporations that like them. Like, I don't know. We're kind of all over the map politically these days. And like you said, at some point you have to pick a party, Republican or Democrat.
Yeah, but that's more of a function of our system. That is not necessarily a function
Yeah.
of what people would do. I mean, I see it all the time, talked about how many different political parties we'd have if we had a European parliamentary system
Yeah.
that was more based on your percentage of the vote and didn't require, only a top two kind of a system and that kind of thing. So, I mean, there's different ways to do it. And there'd be like three or four Republican parties and three or four Democratic parties.
Yeah.
Um,
That would be hard. I know I try to follow like the European systems. Like I'll read because I get the Financial Times. It's probably my favorite newspaper.
oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, comes every day. And then you get like a weekend edition, which is kind of fun. And so they write a lot about you can hear how they clearly they don't like President Trump, but but they write about a lot of the financial stuff, and then they also talk a lot about politics. But you can read about like Hungarian politics, and you can read about German politics and stuff like that, and trying to follow, like you said, the parties within the German system. There's like five or six different. There's like the far right, and then there's like the center right, and then there's like the center, and then there's the center left, and then and if you have 18% of something, you get this many seats.
Right.
It's a weird scenario how that plays out. So
And some of them are structured in a way I actually kind of like, where what happens is the party picks who their candidates are, and people just vote a party, basically. You're not voting
yeah,
for a person. And then whatever percentage the party gets, they get a certain number of seats, and they've ordered their list, and those are the people that go in. And so if you, like in our system, if you had like the party ranked, and you could have like, you could rank Drazen and some other people, right, and put them towards the top, and then you could put, other people at the
yeah,
bottom. I guess I shouldn't say names, huh? That pre-biased. But anyway, whoever you think are your better politicians. And so you only when you do really well in the elections do the people at the bottom of the list make it, right? And I think that would be interesting, even if
It
maybe the
would.
local parties did that, right? That would be cool.
That would be, yeah, it'd be kind of an interesting way to look at it. The minority party would then actually have a little bit more influence, I think, in that sort of system, right?
Well, in most of those systems, no party gets a majority. It's very rare for that to happen. And so they have to build a majority. They have to go to another similar party and say, "Will you power share with us," basically. And it's
Yeah.
when those things break down, the whole system sort of breaks down. The two-party system sort of forces the working together in a lot of
Yeah.
ways because it's much harder to break. I mean, we see this all the time. We hear about,
Mm.
oh, is the Democratic leader or the speaker in trouble? And I mean, maybe, but at the same time, it's really hard to get those people pushed out of their positions just
That
because
is
of
true.
that two-party system. And I feels a lot easier. I feel like I read about Europeans dissolving their governments and calling elections all the time because they can't figure out their stuff, right? So
Yeah, who knows? This exercise called America is 250 years in this year, and it's pretty awesome to think about. Sometimes you have to sit back on these election days and really just be like, it is kind of fun. It's kind of fun the job we get to do every day. And I enjoy the process. It's fun because it ends, is what I like about my job.
our
You know,
system, because we have these certain election dates instead
yeah,
of calling snap elections, you just know there's an election coming. And that
yeah.
does, I think that gives you a finality and lets you know, okay, there's an opportunity to make a change here, or there's an opportunity for us to lose influence, whatever ends up happening in the elections. And certainly right now, some of the polling, the generic ballot polling doesn't look good for Republicans. We'll see how that goes into the summer and the fall. There's an eternity between now and then, really, in political
Eternity.
parlance. It is an eternity, and it feels like an eternity, and things can change. But right now, you'd still bet on, based on history and based on the current data, Democrats to definitely make gains, probably take the House, get close in the Senate. And that'll be interesting to see how that affects the president if those things happen.
Yeah.
So, and then who
I
knows
don't
with
think they'll
Oregon?
take the House. I think they're going to hold. And
Really?
I think some of the redistricting stuff that's happening. I think the Virginia blow was huge for the
That was
Democrats.
huge.
I mean,
Absolutely.
that saves us a lot of seats. And I think that blocks a lot. I think, we're going to pick up one in Louisiana again. They still have they haven't figured out Florida yet. I don't think they've done that one quite yet, but I think we're pretty close. I mean, California, yes, we lose a couple there, but I just kind of feel like there's like you said, there's an eternity. I think we're going to figure it out. And also, Republicans have a ton of money. I mean, more money than we've ever had before going into a cycle, even like this. So they're sitting on a pile of cash, which is really great. So I think we have some opportunity there. I think some of the other primary states that are happening today are going to be some predictors, like kind of what happens in Georgia, kind of who are the people that move forward. Tennessee doesn't really matter, but Georgia is like a bellwether state for us. I think kind of seeing who we put forth in primaries is going to make a difference too. So
Yeah. And in 2 weeks, we'll see. I mean, California has their jungle sort of
yeah,
top two primary system.
that's
So
going to
all
be interesting.
parties vote. That'll be fascinating in 2 weeks. There's the Thomas Massey Kentucky
Yep.
congressional race. That'll be interesting to see that. We'll get the election results from that tonight. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, we're going to get more of
Your
a direction
hero, Mitch
here.
McConnell, finally gets a replacement coming out of the primary today.
That'll be interesting to watch too.
That was kind of interesting. Well, speaking of polling, I think why don't you
Yeah.
lead us through the
Okay.
DHM poll?
So, the Oregonian commissioned a poll on May the 4th. Happy Star Wars Day, or that's when they released it anyway. That's when they had the memo. But they didn't release it. They did a series of stories with it. We've seen a lot of those headlines, the biggest one obviously being Kotek's approval rating. But there's a whole bunch of questions in here, and I put a link in our notes to go into the show notes so that you guys will be able to access this. There's also a presentation, and I think that's actually probably the better one from DHM. It's sort of formatted like a PowerPoint slide deck, and it tells you sort of the different results. Oh, actually, no, that's just the crosstabs. Never mind. There was a thing. There was a thing on the front that made it look like it was a presentation, but it is really just the crosstab. So anyway, if you want to get that deep, you definitely can. Biggest thing I noticed, question number 9 to start out with. What is the most important problem facing Portland or the metro area, depending on where they were located? April of 2024, 53% said homelessness. Okay,
Yeah.
that's 53%. 19% said drug use and addiction. 20% said safety, crime, lack of police presence. Those have just, I mean, plummeted. They're still relevant, but homelessness is down to 33%. Poor leadership in government management is up quite a bit to
Mhm.
19%. If you live in Portland, that does make a lot of sense. But safety and drug use are down by half, really. And businesses leaving has gone from nothing to 5% on its way
Yeah.
up. So it's kind of interesting to see this change in top priorities. And really, homelessness is still the number one issue, but it's a lot less pronounced and it's sort of distributed into some of these other downward effects. I was surprised to see housing affordability pretty much in the same area at 11%. Cost of living is definitely doubled, though. It's up to
Yeah.
9%. So, what do you make of that, Brian?
That's Portland and the metro. They were about the same, right? I mean, if you looked at the metro area as well as Portland, there's some other
Yes.
categories where you could see some delineation change in between Portland, say, and Clackamas and Washington County. But I think with the homelessness stuff, I think, and even housing affordability, there's a certain level of just like you just get used to it.
Yeah.
And I think they start looking at other things. And that's why I believe like the poor leadership. I think what people are saying is like, yeah, homelessness is a problem, but I care more about saying poor leadership.
Hmm.
Because at some point we have to hold people accountable for their being, because money is not the problem in homelessness. The problem is how are we spending it and the leadership around it. And I think what we're seeing is moving from it being a problem to blaming people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's how if I'm reading through that, that's kind of where I think is that I think that cost of living, that's everything from a bus ticket to milk, right? At the grocery store, if you kind of think to your rent. Um, we haven't seen the deflation of rents like they have in other states where they've been building a lot of apartments. We're building apartments, but we're not seeing the deflation in rents at all. And you're still having some of the same issues. So those ones also people just kind of like it just is, right? So they just don't really. And again, I think that will creep into poor leadership because they usually like when what Ronald Reagan always said, right? It's the economy, stupid. So when the cost of living becomes something that people they're going to start blaming, and I think that is where the real problem with Kotek and City of Portland leadership is, and I think you see that further on down the poll where they're really finding somebody to blame. And I think when you move away from because what I also found interesting about the this question 9, and I'll try to do them one at a time without going all over the place here, is there's a lot of things on there.
Yeah.
Drug use, business leaving, economy, education, roads, jobs, ICE, immigration, more social services. I mean, there's a lot of things that people mentioned. And I think that's also part of it too, because I think if you give people open-ended questions, they'll have a bunch of different answers. And what I equate it to this is I would say Portland's a mess, the metro's a mess, and somebody's going to have to get blamed for it.
Well, and the question then is to watch the election results, especially local, and see are incumbents across the board in the metro area going to get tossed, right?
Yeah,
Are all
good
of these
question.
issues going to finally cause so much tumult that they churn through And my question, I think, is on that is, does it apply equally across ideological spectrum? Does it mean that they toss Clackamas commissioners the same that they do in Metro or Washington, right? Or are they still just going to
Yeah.
elevate the people they think are doing a good job? It'll be interesting to see if there's discretion there. A lot of people always think all the politicians are going to lose their jobs, but a lot of times they don't. It's still hard to beat an incumbent. I also thought immigration at 1% really, immigration eats up a lot of time, especially on the Democratic side of
Yeah.
the ledger. To be the 1%, that's in the city of Portland. It's a 1% issue in the whole metro area, 2%. Like, wow. That's a
Yeah.
lot lower than you'd think based on how much discussion and how many bills we had on that in the short session. Goodness gracious. I want to
Yeah.
go down now
Okay.
to, are you considering moving? And of course, they, in the Portland metro area, 36%, so about a third of residents, a little over a third, are considering moving. Where are you most likely to move? 58% said a different state. Not even close. 7% Clackamas, 4% Washington County, 16% somewhere else in Oregon, 6% out of the country. I don't know what those people are thinking. This is still America. It's still better in Oregon than it is in a
Yeah.
lot of other
Canada.
countries.
Yeah.
Now, what are the top two reasons you would move? 62% of those considering moving said taxes. Housing is at 36%. So it's clear,
Mm,
even if, and that's the interesting thing too, is even if we get the cost of housing down, which I think over a year of your own personal budget, you save way more if your housing cost goes down than you do technically on taxes, probably would be my
yeah.
guess. I guess it depends a little bit on how much you make if you're a small business owner and that sort of thing. But for most people, I think reducing their housing costs has a bigger impact on their budget, but in their head, at least, taxes is a bigger deal. And so it's interesting to see where we could, I think, change the narrative about Portland with a really simple answer, which is a tax cut,
Yeah.
which is so fascinating and so against everything that every I don't know a single elected official in Portland that is like, let's cut taxes. That's a Democrat. I don't think there is one. I
No.
think they're like, well, we could freeze the taxes, maybe not raise the taxes, but they won't go far enough to say we just need to cut taxes a little bit. It's funny.
Yeah, I think you're because if you leave, because there's if you leave Portland, that was a candidate calling. If you leave Portland, you do save money, right? I mean, you can literally. I was talking to a friend, and they moved out of Portland a couple years ago, the city, and moved into unincorporated Multnomah County, right? And they saved, and they have a pretty nice house, and they bought a decent house. I think it's over by Portland Golf Club. And if you go over there, like they save like 40 some $1,000s a year in just taxes on their home.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you live in the West Hills of Portland, you're paying a ton of money in taxes, right? And if you move to unincorporated Multnomah County, you're saving yourself a lot of money just by doing that subtle shift. So moving to Clackamas County, if you live in Portland, probably not a bad idea.
Yeah,
Moving to Washington County, probably not helping you as much in the property tax scenario. Moving to rural Oregon, probably saving you a bunch of money, right? So
hmm
I think it'll be, and then moving out of state, clearly everybody wants to move to Idaho and places like that if because they're one of the fastest growing states, right? And so that and taxes is a big driver. I mean, if you start looking at your life, especially if you have a job that allows you, and I think that's why this one also is more important is the ability to do your job in any state in the country is way
right.
easier now than it ever has been before. And
Totally true.
I think that creates more of a mobile society where we can leave. The problem that I think a lot of those people have is can you actually sell your house? Who's going to buy it? Like that becomes a little bit of a problem is like, how do you now?
hmm
Because we haven't really seen the downward pressure on dropping real estate prices though either.
No.
So that I find that to be kind of interesting. But we have seen as people move into like Vancouver and stuff, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of that. Clark County is a really fast growing county in Washington, and it's really because of people fleeing the metro area and moving across the river. So
Absolutely. All right, next one that I noticed. City officials are considering how to fund renovations for the Moda Center. As part of the funding plan, do you support or oppose spending 75 million on an arena renovation to upgrade the facility's green technology out of money from the Clean Energy Fund, which must be how they're doing it. So we'll do clean energy upgrades on the stadium. That way we can use the Clean Energy Fund. 37% support, 55% oppose. Now, if you ask them if they want to raid the fund to pay for police and stuff like that, the support goes way up. I'm trying to find the answer to that one, but no, I seem to be missing it.
No,
But I feel like they did ask if they could spend it on. Oh, here it is. Support 64% if you want to spend the surplus money collected on fire, police, parks, homelessness services. 64% support that. So people, I mean, shoot. Is this Portland just saying they don't want the Trailblazers there anymore? Maybe they're
yeah,
tired of them losing.
I don't even think it's that, Reagan. I think it's like I think a lot of people, general people living in and around Portland, just don't care about sports. It's not a,
Yeah.
I would be curious if they asked the same thing if we would lose our soccer team. I don't know if maybe we aren't a basketball town anymore and we're more of a soccer town. I don't know. Uh, that is they always say soccer's for people that have no skills to play real
Oh,
sports.
I didn't
But
know that.
or they have no, what is it? They have no not athleticism because they're athletic, but they just because you only use your feet, right? You just run around and you kick a ball. But versus like basketball and things like that. But I think that people just don't want to use money to pay for the sports team that is privately owned and this guy is a billionaire. I think a lot of it kind of ties into the anti corporation, anti-billionaire kind of mentality that is kind of permeating amongst the left. And so if you look at, I bet the crosstabs in that specific question, I bet you could really see clearly the difference in the people that are for and against using energy funds, to help the Moda Center. It doesn't make sense to me to use the energy funds for the Moda Center deal because I mean, how is that even remotely close to clean energy fund, which is basically a sales tax, by the way. We should just say the clean
Right.
energy fund is a sales tax on people we want to tax. It's not even that. It's like arbitrarily taxing the people that sell the most stuff. They put a tax on it, which is just horrible. So, but you are right in like the flip of that people would support it going to the what do you call it, the fire and all those other things
Core
is getting
services is what
or
I would call it.
services, yeah, which is interesting. So people want that services, and I think that's also part of people getting used to there being like nonprofits and like services, like free shit, as we like to call it on the right. I
I
think
don't
get rid of
I
it
don't call
all.
it that, but you do. Yes, I think also the trap that politicians continue to lay where they go, our general fund is all spent. We can't possibly support police and fire more. So then we're going to add this new levy or whatever on the side to cover
Yeah.
that stuff. And then they, like they did with the Student Success Act, where it's like tax the corporations. We're adding that in. Okay, great. We've increased funding for education. Whoops, we stole the general fund for education and we're spending it on other stuff. That trick still does work to
Yeah,
some
yeah.
extent, unfortunately, and it takes very disciplined politicians to force the spending to go where it needs to go, general fund to go on the core services. If you really want to skinny down your
And the
government.
Moda and the Moda Center. I mean, Dudley was on our program and talked about how it was a shitty deal that
Yes.
we did with the Blazers, and I think people are kind of understanding that, and that's on the right and the left. I hear that with Republicans. I've seen that in the governor debate about because I think Drazen supported the Moda Center deal or voted for it, and and she's been criticized for that from Republicans for supporting it, and probably praised as well. Because there are things a lot of people that want to see the Blazers stay here too. Because I think if you lose the Blazers, I look at this like more like a sports teams are really good lures for businesses in the grand scheme of economic development, right? Like
Mm,
having a good sports team is like having good hospitals. It's like having good schools. It's like having lower taxes. You got to have, a company wants to go there because they want to be part of the culture of whatever that state city is that they're moving to. Beyond just saving themselves money or expanding, there is some value to it. And I think sports teams and sports franchises is one of those things because then you can use your brand to promote it, globally with through that sports team. So there is a lot of value there. But if taxes are too high, if things are too bad, and I feel like if we lose the Blazers, I mean, man, it's part of our doom loop that could really make things even worse for us. And probably the only reason why I support the deal that we did in the legislature is probably because of that, because you just can't lose sports teams like that. And yeah, was it probably not a good deal? Probably not. But you can still wind in a good deal by locking them into a lease and things like that. So there's some things that you can still do fundamentally that change. That's why I thought the one question, Reagan, where they talked about obviously the net positives and negatives of Kotek and Keith Wilson, which I thought was very interesting.
yeah.
Because Keith, even we've kind of all heard the story on Tina Kotek, but Wilson kind of went from, don't know, what is that, 2025, like a year ago,
Hmm.
they had like a 58% don't know, like they didn't even respond. So his total negative was only 15%. That has skyrocketed to 44% total negative.
Yeah.
So that's huge. So all the people that didn't know him before now hate him because his total positive didn't really change.
Yeah, it's down 1 point. And
Yeah.
Kotek too. I mean, in the Portland metro area, Kotek's a positive, went from 42 to 33 in a year. So
Yeah.
9 point drop. Okay. Her negatives went from 40 to 59, almost a 20 point increase in negatives in 1 year in the Portland metro area. If you go to the city of Portland, she goes from 35 to 55 negative, a
Yeah.
20 point swing. So most of that swing is coming not from Independence in Clackamas County, right? She's actually done okay there. She's held her own on tolling and some of this other stuff.
Yeah.
It's literally just the city of Portland where her approval went from 50 to 37. Like
Crazy.
that is rough.
Yeah. That's a
That's
huge
rough.
drop. I mean,
Also,
for city of Portland.
the city of Portland hates their city council. 24% approval, 62%
I
negative.
know.
Guys,
Well, it's because they're eating pizza and not paying attention. I think part of the problem I could see with that council, one, it's gotten so big that you don't even know who they are, but also the way that that thing is set up, like the way that their dais is set up and stuff like that. I think that's a huge issue when you look at those sort of things. It's like, how are you being presented to the public? And they sit behind this big wall and they all have computers up and stuff like that, and you can't even really see them. And I
right?
think that's a big issue. I would start if I was consulting with the city of Portland, I would start there by like, hey, we got to basically change how you're being viewed just online. Like,
Yeah.
because visual does matter, you
Take
know?
those giant monitors off
Yep.
because they're kind of in between you and the people you serve, right?
Yep.
Have your laptops there. They still have the thing. It's kind of like the dioceses at the legislature. They don't have giant computers. You bring your laptop or iPad.
Yeah.
And but you don't get the same level of attacks on those guys in the public hearings because they do better at engaging or better at hiding them
Totally.
playing solitaire on their iPad or whatever, right? So, hey,
Texting,
the,
they're texting each other is
oh,
what they're
they're
doing
all
the whole time,
texting,
right?
shopping. There's a
Yeah.
lot of shopping,
A lot of
especially on the
shopping.
floor. On the floor, there's a lot of shopping you
We've
watch. You
caught
can
that in the
see
legislature. We've caught
you can
people
see
shopping.
if you sit above, if you sit in the back where all the chairs are above the chamber, you can see the blue bar at the top. They're on Facebook. Um,
Yeah.
it's funny. So yeah, anyway, those are fascinating. And then here's the one that I think I have a little bit of just like, okay, come on, guys. So towards the end here, If you've said that you are affected by Trump's policies, which 72% of people in the metro area say they've been affected by Trump's policies, okay? 17% say they've been affected by his personally affected by his immigration policy.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think they're emotionally impacted
Yeah.
by
Well,
his immigration policies. I'm not confident 15% of people have been personally affected by Trump's immigration policies. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that people are taking an emotional investment in that, not an actual I
yeah.
talked to ICE or I was detained or my best friend was detained. That's maybe I'm wrong,
Well, especially
but it's
with
all
the two, what was it?
self-reported.
It was 2% that's what they cared about. Remember originally
Right.
we looked at like all the things, so it was way down there at like 1 and 2%. So then all of a sudden
Hmm.
you get down here and you talk about Trump, and now it's like 17%. Like really? So if it was that big of a deal, that tells me it's not bigger than homelessness and cost of living and
Right.
stuff like that. And then they're blaming the one thing though I will say in this that is not good for Republicans is there's a lot of blame for Trump.
Yeah.
And I think what that tells me is if you're a voting bloc, remember we talked about with the governor's race, if it's do you blame Kotek or can she put enough blame on Trump to give herself credit? And I think that most of this tells me that most of those voters, even though they hate her at this point, they're probably not voting for the Republican that wins today. That's what that tells me.
Right. And then the last one that I think is fascinating, question 36. Based on what you know, do you support or oppose Oregon's status as a sanctuary state? And this is only Portland Metro. This is not statewide.
Yeah.
57% support, 39% oppose. 39% oppose is a little high than what I would have expected in Portland
Yeah.
Metro area. So I don't know how the balance of the state goes on this, but I'd be fascinated to see sanctuary state asked right now when Trump is unpopular, when his immigration in Oregon, at least a lot of it is unpopular in the cities
Mhm.
and with Democrats, to see how sanctuary status would do. I think its numbers were probably worse under Biden when we had days and lots of data showing that people were coming over the border basically indiscriminately. There was no border security. I would be this would be I would take a guess that this number is now pretty close statewide, then maybe slight lean support for sanctuary state, but not by a ton.
I would say statewide, if you took out Portland Metro, I bet it would, meaning if it was on the ballot, I think people would repeal sanctuary state.
Yeah, I think that would be a fascinating campaign. Obviously, Democrats would
Yeah.
pony up and spend a lot of money to save it.
Yes, yes, they would. But I think that I think it would, well, there would be a lot of money spent, I think, by groups and stuff, but the sanctuary state status, I believe, would fail because even remember, like they did the Portland or Multnomah County had the allowing illegals to vote a few years ago, and it barely passed
That's right. That's right.
because it failed miserably when you got outside of like downtown core areas of
Yeah,
Portland. It failed miserably out in east and southwest Portland and stuff. It was failed really, really bad. And then it barely got over the finish line by just all the voters in kind of North Portland and downtown Portland and stuff. So I don't know. That would be a fascinating campaign to run. It'd be fun. It would be a fun one to run. That's for sure.
I think that would be fun. All right, last thing from DHM. John Horvick tweeted today, obviously election day. How will Measure 120, the 6% increase in fuel taxes, compare to Measure 82? This is the one that Senator Starr talks about a long time when Republicans were in control, and they put repeal the weight mile tax and then increasing fuel taxes on the ballot. And it got 13% yes, 87% no. What do you
Hmm.
think, Brian? How does Measure 120 compare? Does it get more or less yes? We call that, by the way, that 87-13, very close to a full Hovey, a 90-10.
Yeah.
as we call it, the Holvey.
Paul Holvey.
Yeah.
I like it. Look at you creating new terms. Weren't you getting mad at me for creating new
A
terms?
lot of it's just because yours aren't any good, but no, that a lot of people in the Capitol call it now when it's in 9010. I can't take credit for that. I've heard it from lots of people, but
Yeah,
yes, it's Paul Holvey. He saved himself. He won his recall
I love
election to
that one.
90-10 against kind of the UFCW guys, and
I
he's
love
now a
calling that a
legend in
Holvey.
Oregon politics.
No, I think there's enough of the Democrats that are voting. I think a lot of them are totally fine with taxing themselves more
Right.
because they live with Democrat guilt that I have something, so therefore I need to collectively tax myself to make myself feel better. So they'll vote. So I'm guessing more probably like 75-25.
I think the yes will get up to like 30%, but maybe I'm just totally off base. But I think we get up to 30% for yes.
Yeah, 30% is tough because I mean I think
We're
it's a bellwether for us, right? I mean, the more that
true.
we see it fail, the better we are in the legislature for, Democrats not trying to push some more
Right.
taxes through. So I do want to see it to be super high for that, just only for our own
Oh,
game.
I'm not saying that's what I want to have happen. I just think we're a more polarized state now. And so 30% of people are willing to like raise taxes basically,
Yeah.
no matter what. So I could be wrong. Here's a good question. How did Measure, now this one, there was a crazy thing in Measure 97 called a yes and a no campaign, which we haven't had, obviously. But we'll see so Measure 97. Now, this was voting to tax corporations, not people. So, no got 60%, almost 60%. Yes got 40%. So I feel like with no campaign, 25% would be like a pretty reasonable, but I think they might get up to 30%.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think
Javity's trying to juice that number in Clatsop. It's gonna pass by a wide margin as the Javity gas
the
tax. I don't know if you
Javity
saw
gas
that.
tax. I
He was
mean, the
putting,
fact that he's oh, I did, yeah, the fact that he's doubling down and saying
oh
vote yes
man,
and call it the Javity gas tax. I mean, he literally wants whoever wins that primary. Hopefully, it's Adam Dean, but whoever wins that primary to like literally like that's all that my campaign will be is the Javity gas tax, Javity gas. Just making a moratorium on
right?
Javity.
Yeah,
You
no.
know, and if you want more taxes, that's your guy.
And he was the deciding vote. That's the thing is he's the deciding vote on
Yes.
that thing too. So
Yes.
at the end of the day, you can really put it on him, and I think
Yeah.
that's probably going to cost them the election. But
Him and
we will
Mark
see.
Meek. Him and Mark Meek. Meek was the deciding vote in the Senate, So I mean, not only did it cost, and I don't know if that'll cost Mark Meek his job. I think Javity's kind of trying to own it more than Mark Meek. I
Sure.
think Mark Meek's trying to distance himself from it.
He's like,
Uh,
remember when I opposed tolling? Remember that?
yeah. Yeah, he's at least the smarter politician. On
Yes.
that end of it, he's trying to run away from it and kind of hide under a rock and make sure people don't remember, which is at least smart to do. But it had to pass both chambers, right?
Right.
And it took all 18 to get it over the Senate. So we have to remember that it took all 18 of the
Yep.
Democrats to vote yes on that one.
All right, Brian. We got to wrap it up. So here we go.
Okay.
I would like the title of this episode to be Three Bold Predictions about the May primary. So we should probably make three bold predictions about the
Okay.
May primary. So that could be true. I will go first.
Okay.
I'm going to start. I don't know if this is bold since the polling, but early on, I was talking with some friends and I was like, I think that Bethel might come in behind David Medina. And so that's my prediction is despite making all the debates, I think Bethel made all of the debates and Medina did not. David Medina will come in. So let's see. I'm predicting, I would say it's Drazen, Deal, Dudley, Medina. So that puts Bethel at fifth. So I think Bethel will come in fifth behind David Medina. That's my bold prediction.
Wait, isn't that what I sent you last night?
It probably is. It probably is.
I
But
don't know how
you were more
bold that is.
specific. It's probably not bold now based on the polling. Everybody's gonna
I'm
think I
just
made it up.
kidding.
That's fine. You could You
No,
could
no,
think that.
I
But
think
you put
I
numbers to your bold prediction.
I did. But I think, well,
You
that's
want to
hard
read
to
them?
put the real numbers there, I think, but I do follow your line because I think Medina people are Medina people, right? And they're not, so he has a base. And I think Bethel, the problem with the Bethel people is like, I think Bethel people are pragmatic and they go, okay, well, I like Danielle. She's great, but she can't win. So now who am I going to pick? And then they move to the top three. They either go Dudley, Deal, or Drazen, right? So I think that's why Bethel, ultimately, however, I think that she's probably done well for herself in an off election year for herself. I think that's probably not a bad spot for her to run. And ultimately, I mean, I wish she would have done a little, well, if your predicting is correct. I think that, it would have been nice if she would have done better than that. But I think she also ingratiated herself with a lot of people and she made herself look smart. So the reality is maybe it's not as bad as I was thinking it would have been to stay in the race, but 4% could be the difference. And that's what I have her at. I think she gets 4%. I think Medina gets 6%. I think Dudley gets 18%, Deal 28%, Drazen 29%. And then I think the rest of the field gets 15%.
Hmm.
It's kind of pulled off the top. And part of that's based on some 22 stuff. If you look at all the other candidates, the 15% number is kind of all the other ones, right? I mean, all those guys kind of down the Paul Romero and those sort of folks, right? And so I follow your prediction with it, but I actually put real numbers to it. So
Yes.
we'll
Yes. I'm
see.
too. I wouldn't be able to guess real numbers. Yours feel very correct though.
Yeah.
All right.
And I
So
didn't even use AI, Reagan. Let's just
good. Good for you, Brian.
that was a that was studying our polling and looking at some of the other polling. I do find that I do find the polling on the one guy that we had on the Mark, is it Mark Anderson?
Hmm.
The like he's just wedging him. He's done a pretty good job of wedging himself into the conversation by just
Well,
polling all the time.
again, when there isn't a lot of data out there, even bad
Yeah.
data really
Yeah.
does get. And now he did another poll, and he did it this time with phones. However, it appears like maybe phones with with volunteers supervised by someone who did some polling. And I'm still not sure on the back end what he's doing, if he's doing any leveling of the data at all, or if he just
Yeah.
called 600 Republicans. I mean, you got to distribute geographically and in gender and in age and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So I don't know that he's doing any weighting on the back end, but that polling found a quote unquote dead heat between Drazen and Deal. So we'll see
Yeah.
how that goes.
That
Man,
will be interesting.
I feel like this is going to be a very conventional wisdomy primary, and it's hard to make a prediction that is off the wall. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Are there
I
any more
think
bold predictions we can come up with here, Brian?
I have one, but
Okay.
just before we leave that thought, I do want to say the bold prediction is that Reagan, you and I have forced the conversation of doing polling in primaries and releasing those polls. And I think we
Hmm.
should pat ourselves on the back for not only doing our own poll and putting it out there, but I think having the conversation about doing it, I think is kind of forcing other people to do more of it. And I think Dudley, even Dudley doing who can beat the Dre's, who can beat Kotek in the fall kind of poll, like
Right.
putting that stuff out there, they realize that it's actually a tool.
Maybe do we even talk about that? Dudley put out a poll
No.
with a week to go saying he could beat Kotek, that it showed him, and it's just from Hoffman, the same pollster we used, showing in the general election matchup right now, he beats Kotek 48 to 44. Also showed Drazen 44 to 44 or something like that,
Yeah,
tied
yeah, yeah,
with Kotek basically. No primary head to head. He didn't show any primary numbers him head to head with
yeah.
Drazen. He,
And
as far as
they
I
did
know,
that.
well,
They
that's the
should have
question,
released the
right?
poll. I would say release the whole thing. If you're going to
Yes.
do that, you got to give me the crosstabs and you got to give me the whole poll.
Yeah. Even just a
Otherwise, I'm
full
going to
top
discount.
line with all the question numbers. And even
Yeah.
DHM, I give them so much credit for this. When they release a statewide poll, they even put the questions on there and they say, redacted or did not release for
Yeah.
private client or whatever. Like, so you know that they did the question. There's like an integrity level to it. And with Dudley's poll, without even a top line memo to show, hey, question one did not release, question two did not release. We only released this one that we like with the matchup, right? So anyway, uh, fascinating stuff. Also, Ed Deal called on Drazen to resign last night. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
Drop out of the race. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get an update today that she's dropped out. I don't know. He got Rep Yunker to file an ethics complaint against her for sending a text message with a video of him without a disclaimer on it. Which, by the way, the rule. Here's the problem. I'm going to rant for a second. I know this isn't our ranting episode. The Secretary of State and the legislature has changed the law on this so many times, people are confused. So, for everybody right now, I'm going to walk you right through it. We used to not have a disclaimer law at all. You could not put disclaimers. A lot of people still did, paid for by, but there was no rules for it. For the longest time, you were not required. You were required to have a return address, but that was a postal service thing, not state law. Then we added it, okay, paid for by. Then we added the pack number. You had to have the pack number on it. Then we took away having to have the pack number. So you still have to say paid for by, but you don't have to put your pack ID number anymore. And so many people are so confused by that now. And then we used to have where you had to do text messages with no paid for by disclaimer.
Yeah.
Then they added the paid for by disclaimer to the text. Then they took it away. So there's no requirement for disclaimers on text messages. So he's filed an ethics complaint based on old law, basically.
Yeah.
The Ethics Commission isn't even the right place to file that complaint. I think they just preferred the look of the ethics complaint versus an elections complaint.
Yeah.
The Secretary of State is where you'd file that. It won't be a violation, but he's calling on her to resign. Or drop out of the race or whatever.
Yeah.
And this is weird because he's also called for a unity breakfast, I think, tomorrow after the primary.
Yeah.
It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be a weird unity breakfast.
You know who the only person is going to be at the Unity breakfast? The winner.
Ed Deal.
The winner.
Just the winner.
Because the losers are not going to be there because they're not going to care. It's only the winner that it's really only the winner that wants unity. By the way,
we should offer to record the unity breakfast. That would be funny.
That's going to be hilarious. I'm with you. So the texting stuff is a very interesting scenario. So when you text, and I do a lot of texting, right? So you have a platform in which, and normally what you have is you have basically you can pick 541 numbers, 503 numbers, and 971 numbers as prefixes for statewide texting. And so when you use a firm to do it, they probably only have like 4 or 5 different 541 numbers, and they probably got 2 or 3 503 numbers and stuff. So the first thing you would say is like, hey, if I'm going to do negative texting, maybe I shouldn't use the same phone number that I use to do positive texting.
If you're trying to hide your identity.
If you're trying to hide. But also, I would say, though, that sometimes the texting companies use random
Right.
phone numbers. And so if you're using the same company, chances are some text messages are going to have the same phone number that they come from. And part of that is just the software that goes into like sending out, a 50,000 person text per se. You're going to end up with some. And so people don't delete the text. You would see, and that's, I'm sure, how they got caught, right? Is somebody has all the text messages on their phone and then they see, oh, look, it's the same one that has the negatives, which is kind of interesting. So I would say that there's a couple issues with that. But the reality is that's like the behind the scenes of texting. And the fact that you don't have to put a paid for on there, but I do on other things, it just seems dumb. Like, why? It's easy to put a paid for on a text, and it's a lot harder to put it on a TV commercial on audio because I lose 4 seconds.
Right.
I'd rather, it's easy to put it on an image on a text. Why not, or just put it in there and paid for by? I mean, that just seems silly to me.
Mm-hmm.
The rules are just dumb. And I hope Tobias gets in there, and actually he should have a work group, and we should get together and basically say, this rule's dumb. This rule makes sense. Like you have to put the paid for now on field signs, but you don't have to put it on yard signs. Like
I
it's
think it has a lot to do with size and visibility. On text, I get because if you're texting now, most of the time you're texting with an image, you can put the paid for by on the
yeah.
image, but it does take up a good chunk of your words available. So I do sort of understand
You
it.
don't have max characters anymore in texting.
Oh, you don't?
No, they remember the
Oh,
Dudley
see,
text? That was like a
yeah,
book
that's
on his
true, huh?
pro-life stance. He was just sent
That's
out a
true.
book. You tell me you can't put paid for by Chris Dudley at the bottom? I mean, that's, 5 words.
Well, and sometimes I laugh because it's like, who needs a paid for by on field signs? It has the candidate's name on it. Like,
I know.
is there a mass? Is there just like, oh, we can't stop these guys? They keep
Yeah.
buying signs for other people. Nobody does that.
Yeah. And when,
That's like when I have two-factor authentication to log into Pacific Power. It's like, oh no, I hope somebody doesn't hack in and pay my power bill. It's never gonna happen. It's literally never gonna happen. So
It's
anyway.
so true. It's so true. I find that so dumb. And nobody uses signs that say my opponent sucks,
Mhm.
right? And paid for by the other
Because
opponent.
it's
Nobody
free
does that
name ID
anymore.
for your opponent. Don't do
Yeah.
that. That's
Nobody
dumb.
does. Nobody
Yeah,
does
so
that. I'm with you.
anyway.
All right.
Uh
Well, my only other bold prediction, and it's not really
yeah.
bold. I think Tammy Carpenter wins House District 27.
Yeah, that's what it seems
We
like
get
a
a
lot of
devout
people.
socialist communist on the Democratic caucus, which is a bummer.
And it seems like with Munoz, Leslie Munoz, not Myra, who I think
Yeah.
will lose, Myra Munoz,
Yeah.
Leslie Munoz and Farahchichi, I believe that triggers the creation. They're going to create the Democratic Socialist Caucus now in the
Yeah.
House of Representatives. And I think that adds a interesting
USA.
new dynamic. I'm trying to hide my glee
Yeah.
there because
Travis
I
Nelson
think
probably be part of it.
for Republicans, it'll be fascinating to see who chooses to join. That's the funny thing about the creation of these caucuses that aren't like identity based, like, oh, the Democratic caucus. So if I have a D behind my name, I go to the Democratic caucus, right?
Yeah, right.
Versus a choice. I'm going to define myself as a Democratic socialist, right? And you've got a moderate caucus that's kind of like sort of secretive and not official, right? And because they're each of them keep getting tagged and primaried, right? So they try to be a little
Yeah.
on the DL about it, right?
Geez, the mod caucus on the Democratic side, that's like
Yeah,
they want to keep that as like the biggest secret, and sliced bread. And it's funny
yeah,
because I've heard different people tell me who's in that mod caucus,
right.
and then I hear names, and I'm like, no.
During session, everybody's a moderate, right? They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm a part of the mod squad, absolutely." And then you get to voting time, and you're like, "Okay, so there's three, right, or whatever the number ends up being on each particular." It's all issue dependent. That's the thing is everybody likes to pretend that I'm an absolutist on this, and the truth is, it's really all based on the language on almost everything. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
few non-negotiables, but everything else is kind of up for negotiation in a lot
Yeah.
of ways.
Well, that's how you pass bills. We know that. I mean, you say, hey, if you change
Yeah.
this line to that line, then I'll vote yes.
Did you know
Right?
being an absolutist has passed zero bills? That it's just like, I'm never going to change my bill. You know where those
Yeah.
bills go? They
Yeah.
sit on the president's desk and they die, or they never make it out of committee and they die.
Yeah. Aren't those Yonkers bills? Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
If they get filed on time. If they get filed on time. That's the other thing. I did text somebody. I was like, so Representative Yunker can't get his bills filed on time, but he can file an ethics complaint in time. Okay. All right.
I know, and it's
So.
really rich coming from a guy who's just been hammering Drazen online with
Yeah,
some BS, right? And like it's just
he's been tweeting a lot. And a lot of this is just on how you view it, right?
yeah.
Certain votes you can put through any filter, and so you go,
I
"Oh, you
don't
voted
care.
for
He loves that deal. It's
did
fine.
you vote for a state budget bill? Well, you voted for all of the fraud they do, right? Like
Yeah.
you can go to the extreme, but
Well, that's what's just so rich coming from Yunker, who's was blasting Drazen about her votes, and then Drazen sends out a text about Ed Deal's votes, and like, how dare you?
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, how dare
Exactly.
you mischaracterize? Like, I don't know. I think that all goes to the point of like we all just sit back and laugh sometimes, especially because everybody mischaracterizes everybody, and every vote can be mischaracterized in some way or another, and it just seems silly to me. And but it does make for fun political fodder. And at the end, we knew this was going to get chippy between Drazen and Deal, and I think that's really what we're seeing is the results of that getting chippy, and it happens in primaries. However, I don't think the unity breakfast is going to be all that unifying, but we'll see. I mean, there's also a unity lunch happening next week with the ORP chair and Lucetta Elmer and Bruce Starr, and they try to bring the candidates together. I think that one probably has some more validity to it than the unity breakfast. So I think I still don't think that the governor nominees, I think you need to give people maybe a few more weeks to cool off before you want to bring them together and
Yes.
endorse,
Quick
whoever wins. I feel like it's a little too soon, but hey, I'm on board with it. But I'm a professional. I'm not the one on the ballot, right? So, it's a
quick
difference.
quick update, Brian. Before we go, I forgot about this. I typed it out, but I forgot to mention it. It's economy stupid is James Carville, probably not
Oh,
Ronald Reagan.
sorry.
That was
Yeah,
Carville in 92 with
that's
the
right.
Clinton campaign. So I just wanted to correct
Thanks
that
for
before we
fact
get
checking me.
a billion emails. No problem, Brian. That's what I'm here for. And then Ed Deal on May 1st said he scheduled his Unity lunch. It's Thursday, May 21st. Time to be announced. Check eddeal.com for updates at the
Oh,
Grand Hotel. So very
oh,
accessible.
all right.
So open to Republican candidates, ORP leadership, grassroots leaders, donors, and supporters. So, if I was available, I would go, but I'm not sure I'm actually going to be
I
available.
think you need to go, Reagan. I believe you should be there for some unity.
Maybe I can take a picture and see how attendance is. So it'll be
You're
fascinating. But I got to
closer
check
than
for
I am.
time. I got
You're
to check
closer
for the
than I am.
time. I'll be checking eddeal.com tomorrow and Thursday morning. So we'll see if he actually puts that
Should
up
be
there.
wild. Well, we'll put this out right away, so it gives people something to listen to today while they're waiting for results tonight. And then
Yep.
we'll hop on, and I'm sure we'll podcast tomorrow, I would imagine. So,
Go see a movie, go golfing, go do
yeah.
something.
I heard that Michael
Because
Jackson movie was pretty good. I haven't seen it
yeah,
yet, but I heard it was good.
sure. Absolutely. So there's lots of options. No Hawaii trip this year for Portland Housing Authority staff, says the new boss. Not just this year. Maybe they get to go back to Hawaii. Gosh, these headlines just make me crazy sometimes.
It's pretty
Why is
wild.
the Portland Housing Authority going to Hawaii? Like,
Well, I do
goodness
believe that
gracious.
government employees should get a bonus. I really feel like they put in a lot of hard work. I'm kidding.
I just.
Oh, crazy. Wild stuff. All right, man. I will talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Good luck out there.
Yeah, we need it.